So I wanted to revisit the Frost video I made for point 5 that, obviously ended up happening because they didn't do any changes for any classes, really. And I guess this is more aimed at point 2, or if we feel really sad, the end of the expansion. But there's just, even if they take parts of this, very, very small changes that will drastically improve the experience that people have with, say, our hero talents. But I think in general, this is a very good thing that is going to align with their expectations for the game going forward, right? My stated goals for what I'm going to talk about here are to streamline shatter mechanics so it's easier for everyone to understand. That's the core, that's literally just how you play Frost, right? And so I'm also going to be removing the unintuitive gameplay, the degenerate gameplay. So it is going to be, okay, I have this buff, it means I can shatter any of my spells, right? And then I shatter them, and it's going to make them have higher crit chance against everyone they hit. And there's not going to be like this weird thing where it's like, oh, you get Fingers of Frost, and then you also have Flurry, and which one do you want to cast for Frostbolt? And do you want to munch it? And if I have Fingers of Frost, what if I overcap it or something? Or why do I want to Flurry twice when I already have Winter's Chill on the target, right? All that stuff that doesn't make sense because they built up kind of this bullshit design over the course, especially due to hero talents that incentivizes you to do it. And there's just simple ways to remove that. So let's cover the main issues. Obviously there's a lot, but the main issues from the core design standpoint, which is the lack of a niche, overly complex shattering, right? We have Fingers Frost, we have Winter's Chill, we have our freezes. They're all used in different situations. They all affect different things, and they all function differently, right? I mean, if you ever tried to explain to someone when they should freeze and like why, it's just ridiculous. It's like, okay, go into your Mythic Plus dungeon, figure out which mobs are freezable, and then if X number of them are freezable, you want to flurry the main target and then cast like Glacial Spike and then Ice Nova at the end of your Glacial Spike, or but only do that if you're shattering like 4 of them and stuff. And it's ridiculous. So yeah, try like that. Uninspired tier sets. I mean, if any of you read the Arcane article on Wowhead, Pora mentions how great Arcane's tier sets have been, and I agree. Arcane has had just consistently banger tier sets, tier after tier. And Frost, on the other side of the spectrum, has had really boring tier sets. We had like a good one in season 3 of Dragonflight, of course, but just because it was good doesn't mean it's, not uninspired. We've essentially had the same tier set 4 times in a row, right? We had Ice Lance generates Brain Freeze and Cleaves, then we had Flurry Cleaves, and then we had Glacial Spike Cleaves, and now last year we had Ice Lance Cleaves, and now we have a effect that's essentially a trinket that only scales with Verse and doesn't do anything, right? That's crazy. We've had some really, really bad tier sets. Hero talent screen, unintuitive gameplay. This is talking about like, either the Frostfire Bolt spam because it has the Ignite-like effect where it just scales stronger than doing your main spells, or the fact that you like have to use Flurry while munching Winter's Chill, right, as Frostfire, just because you generate too many excess frost and you have too many brain freezes from excess fire. And then Spellslinger just like tosses abilities out of its rotation because of the way the splinters work, which is how old icicles worked, which we fixed, and then they added it back, which was stupid. So yeah, I just a lack of oomph because like Ice Lances don't really hit as hard as they do. They have in the past. They kind of stated they're going to increase it. Still doesn't really feel like they have. And then resource bloat or drought for the hero specs is a bit of an issue. Obviously something that I've been talking about for a while, and you can just like skip past this point if you're tired of hearing about it, but it's more fleshed out, is the niche issue, right? Where there's been reasons to play Arcane, at least, and Fire to an extent. In Raid, for Frost, it's been much more ignored just because since Dragonflight, the thing that when they expanded talents through the Dragonflight tier set, or talent trees, they gave a lot of specs to Dark Cleave, and Frost really isn't that strong at it anymore. Like even in our own class, you're not going to be like absolutely owning as a Frost Mage on 2 target versus like Fire or Arcane, right? Fire spreading its massive ignites every global with its 5 million fire blasts is not going to be doing that much worse than you. But anyway, So there's a few options. One of the negative things about looking at spread cleave is Blizzard tends to make spread cleave classes pretty trash, right? Look at Boomkin; they're kind of just always bad. So you would probably want this restricted in the same way that Destro Warlock is. And in that case, I don't know if you'd really want to be a second Destro Warlock. It's definitely a valid concern. So we'll think about that. But I like to play Frost and Raid. So anyway, again, the idea really is that you have Blizzard. It just functions like Starfall, but it's not really the way that we use our spread cleave. So it's not going to be like uncapped AoE like a Boomkin is, which would hopefully keep it more in check. Because it can still have the target cap for its damage. And I would want them to increase the duration or the cooldown to match the current duration, because I do not want to be pressing Blizzard every 4 seconds anymore. It's 2025. And then you can cap the Frozen Orb CDR, which is one of the major problems with it, being a larger radius, quote unquote, by being a Starfall effect. I don't care. Cap the Frozen Orb CDR. You can then make it less degenerate, so you're not getting to a point where you're like spamming Frozen Orb every second, which I don't think is very interesting, personally. And this also gives us room for more abilities in our AoE rotation, because we're just casting Blizzard half as much, which is good. And then for the above, I would just make Splay Nice always hit a second target, and then while Blizzard active hits up to 4 enemies that are affected by your Blizzard for reduced damage, like say 33% each, so it's still like at 120% or something. I don't know. But however the Outlaw Blade Flurry works is exactly how I would expect this to work, right? And then the caveat to this is I would also do this effect. So Splay Nice always hits the second target, so we always have the 2 target cleave component. But while Blizzard's active, we just do 20% less damage with Splay Nice. This is because it hits multiple targets. I don't want to encroach on like the 5 target cleave that like Outlaw has, for instance. It's very strong, and ours is more looking at spread cleave rather than 5 target close cleave. It's still going to be good damage, but we're not trying to take that away from them, right? So again, the idea preserves 2 target strength without Blizzard up. When accessing spread cleave, you use value relative to melee classes, mobs are close, and you're still strong. So the core issues to be resolved, in my opinion, the unescapable AoE loss, I feel like this is just often under discussed. People speak about how annoying it is for Frozen Orb to go places or the Blizzard stuff, but you are losing a lot of AoE damage in real scenarios versus a sim, which is going to tell you that your Frozen Orb's hitting the target the whole time. That's just not true unless you're fighting a raid boss. And even then, it's also not true in raid bosses that dash, like Sikran, for instance. So there's a few options here. My preferred one is probably just make it as fast as Arcane Orb and then just have it apply a dot, which is essentially the same thing, right? It's essentially currently applying a dot. It just is ticking every second while it's touching the target. So if you just have it apply a dot, they can stack, right? But it has individual durations per stack. That's literally the same thing as our current Frozen Orb, but with no damage loss, and you can still shatter it. So it's that's just way better. You can do some weird things with the dot effect, give you increased crit chance or something against it. I don't know, whatever. Pack dice, whatever you want to do. Or you can make it follow the target, which is often the suggested thing, like Ravager was. I prefer the dot option though. So Mastery, commit to adding new effects to it, or just make it so that shattered spells do more damage, because everything non-mastery is on shatter, so then you don't need to whitelist things twice like they do now. It's just ridiculous that it's a dead set for Frostfire and we're a year plus into the X pack just because someone didn't want to put the effects onto the same scaling as Countstorm for mastery, right? That's low effort. Frostbolt, no one likes spamming it in our core rotation, so just eat the Frostbolt challenge and prevent it from shattering. Okay, I don't care, just make it not shatter. We don't need to have the same problem come up over and over again. So Flurry Brain Freeze is too powerful. The full charge refresh often munches the natural CDR, and the 50% increased damage means that you're incentivized to not waste it in times where you normally wouldn't use Flurry. And that just overly complicates the rotation and makes it unintuitive for new players or people trying to learn a spec. So just reduce the base cooldown to 20 seconds, then have it CD scale with haste, so one of those green CDs, and then have Brain Freeze just give 50% charge instead of 100 and have no damage amp. And then you're good there. I want to redesign Shatter, right? We have had the issue where they design bosses with really large hitboxes, and that gives us issues because our Shatter combo precast breaks at about 36 yards from the boss, which you can still hit. You're not going to be that far away from like a high hitbox mob if to be 36 meters away, because your spell needs to travel to the center of their hitbox, not the edge. So if you're staying like, for instance, on Volcross last year, if you're staying on the very inner edge of his arena, you were still like 30 yards away from him or something. So this is an issue that comes up all the time. It's really annoying. The other half of it that isn't talked about as much is if you're like within 8 yards of a target, you can't precast either. So that's just causing a lot of loss from like Glacial Spike precast or just like Frostbolt munching a Winch Chill after your flurry cast because of how far you are away. So I just don't like that. It doesn't need to exist, and we can accomplish simplifying Shatter at the same time as fixing this issue, which is just removing Winch Chill and then making Fingers of Frost effect. I was gonna go at this a couple ways. It could be all spells except Frostbolt and Flurry, so you can make it affect like Ice Nova, Frozen Orb, Comet Storm. But I would like hesitate to make it apply to Blizzard and Frozen Orb. I just would still like there to be a way to shatter Blizzard and Frozen Orb. And then the Comet Storm question is also how would we keep that interaction with Coldest Snap? You could still keep it that Comet Storm is affected by Fingers of Frost and then shatters itself against all targets, which is very strong, especially for AoE. And then, you know, it's still fine. You just make Cone of Cold, give one Fingers of Frost, and since you're orbing for your Comet Storm in the Cone of Cold combo, you would get a Fingers of Frost anyway. So your orb, Comet Storm shattered by the Fingers of Frost from the orb, Cone of Cold, your next Comet Storm shattered by the Fingers of Frost from the Cone of Cold. So anyway, that seems kind of fine. But yeah, so Fingers of Frost, shatter all spells, essentially. This is how it worked pre-Winch Chill. And then I didn't put this down here, really. But it would not shatter Frostbolt. Oh, actually I did put it here. Yeah, so make Fingers of Frost affect all spells except Frostbolt and Flurry. Okay. Frostbolt, get rid of it. No, it can't shatter anymore. I don't want to press it. Okay. I'll press it for resource generation stuff, but you're not going to make me press it over Ice Lance. Especially on the like Winch Chill. I mean, it would be less egregious in this case because there's not munching involved, right? You lose your precast if you're like spamming Frostbolt and then you have to like do an extra Frostbolt into Flurry after you consume Winch Chill. I think it would be less egregious in the case where the precast no longer exists and Fingers of Frost is all that exists. So yeah. Anyway, that's good. Flurry would provide 2 Fingers of Frost. Technically, each Fingers of Frost is less valuable because it can also affect Comet Storm, so you actually lose Shatter cast, which is fine. It causes you to cast a little bit more Frostbolts. We have a lot of resource generation right now, too much in my opinion. So yeah, and if you are shattering things slightly less, they just can give more power to it. Like they can make Ice Lance stronger, they can make Glacial Spike stronger, etc. Flurry would auto-shatter itself. That's just so that we keep kind of about the same value of crit as we currently have now, because it already auto-shatters itself. And I don't want it to, like it not shattering to reduce the value of our crit, because technically shatter increases the value of each crit point up to a certain amount. So yeah, and then we would increase the max cap of Fingers of Frost to 4. So then you could double Flurry for 4 Fingers of Frost, and then shatter 4 spells in a row, right? And then that's pretty good. But yeah, so what does this solve? So Fingers of Frost works against all targets. So GS, for instance, would auto-shatter against 2 target with just Fingers of Frost, rather than you having to Flurry the main target, and then Glacial Spike, and then Flurry after the Glacial Spike on the off target to shatter it. So this actually increases our 2 target quite a bit. This also solves our range issues, which are entirely due to travel time shenanigans with Winch Chill. It'll solve the problem where you don't generate an Icicle because your Flurry hadn't reached the target before you cast Ice Lance. That happens on high target ranges. It'll solve the issue with Frostbolt consuming your Winch Chill when you're trying to precast it. It'll solve the issue of you're too close to the boss, so now your Glacial Spike just isn't going to shatter as a precast. Solves all of those just because Fingers of Frost works on cast rather than on hit. Okay. And this also simplifies shattering immensely. Aside from, I didn't really know what to do with freezes here, so I left them out, but you don't really need freezes in a world where Fingers of Frost works like this. Okay, because the issue with Winch Chill is aside from Cone of Cold, we can only apply it to 1 target at a time, so you can't AoE shatter Comet Storm effectively outside of Cone of Cold. With the way that Fingers of Frost would here work, it would mean that you can effectively always shatter Construct, because it would just make all of the comets shatter, right, against all targets. That's how Fingers of Frost works. So all of a sudden, any sort of free stuff is out of the window, and there doesn't need to be this consideration for, oh, if I shatter with a different effect, then it will do X, right? Like Spellslinger pre 11.0.7 or whatever, or 11.1, whenever they did the change, where you only got splinters if you shattered by Winter's Chill. And that's still true, that you only get splinters if you shatter by Winter's Chill or Fierce Frost. So it's like in AoE, you want to Glacial Spike and Ice Nova to shatter against 2 targets, but you can't. You literally shouldn't as Spellslinger, because it doesn't generate splinters. And that's stupid. Like, it's the same effect, more powerful because it's against multiple targets, and you just don't want to do it because they artificially didn't include this aspect of shattering. So by simplifying it, you just kind of remove that issue. Your talents, Frostfire, it literally needs 2 changes to fix the current iteration that people dislike, right? People don't like the weird flurrying, they don't like the constant procs and everything. So all you have to do, make Frostfire Empowerment only give excess frost, so then you're getting far less excess fire, or it only gives excess fire, so you gain far less excess frost than we currently have. And excess fire is the one that you mainly care about anyway, because it's stronger. And then if you do the flurry change on the core sections, then excess frost can kind of stay as it is, where it gives a brain freeze, where in that situation, brain freeze is only 50% of your natural CDR. But if not, they should just change excess fire to a flat 10-second CDR and flurry, because the main reason that you are like slamming your flurries and then slamming your ice lances like that is just because excess fire giving a full flurry is ridiculous. It gives you like 80% more flurries than Spellslinger gets, and that's just absolutely ridiculous. And then the other issue with us double slamming flurries is because we have so many excess frost, but the main one is that we have no punishment for it, because we just get a full flurry back every time we spend excess fire. So yeah, and then also I said the changes to flurry providing Fingers Frost make it fine to use twice in a row, which is also true. And add the fucking effects to mastery. And then for Spellslinger, I don't like the orb resets when you have to manually cast them due to overriding the CDR when we have 2 other CDR mechanics. I think this is ridiculous. I would also go in the vein of make Cola Snap not reset orb, just Comet Storm, and it's still very strong. So I'd just make it autocast with the or improvements from above, and then also make our splinters scale 1-to-1 with mastery. For Arcane, your splinters from Spellslinger scale 1-to-1 with mastery. For Frost, our scale is 0.75 to 1 with mastery, which is why Frost Spellslinger still likes Verse and thinks mastery is like a mid stat to low stat, because it scales worse, and splinters are like 20% of damage. Anyway, that's my manifesto. I'm gonna post it somewhere on the forums. I don't know where yet. You know, come on. The thing is, you don't even need to, like, you don't need to change their talents for any of this. None of our talents need to change, right? Half of this you don't even need to do. Like, you could ignore the spread cleave options and just do, like, the other half would be good. You could just do the hero talent pieces and it'd still be a massive improvement, right? You could do the Frozen Orb improvement. You could do just these, like these 3, right? And that would be massive. All of these are just really good high value changes. Obviously it might not be exactly what individual people want, and I know, like, you know, it'd be great if they provide a non-GS option, and personally I think they should make GS easier to use by having it replace Frostbolt and everything. But all of these things are just, they're good suggestions, or something in a similar vein that keeps like kind of the core idea for what these are trying to solve, right? Our spec is fundamentally flawed, and that's shown by the range issues. It's shown by kind of the overcomplication of the shattering that's kind of occurred over time. It's just, we need a look, right? And it's not even like this is that difficult. So anyway, interested to hear your thoughts, and I hope they do some spec stuff in 11.2. So goodbye.